One.
When I was in grade 5, I ran away from home with this friend who was in grade 6. The plan was to go downtown in a large city in Canada and panhandle for money. I really had no reason, except that I was young and stupid and it sounded like an adventure. I called my parents from a payphone, telling them I was downtown, and then hung up before they could say anything. By the time it started to get dark, we had panhandled about $1. We asked this one guy for money, and he told us that not only could he buy us food, but he could also give us a place to stay for a number of days. He took us down to the sub shop, and to us he just seemed like the nicest guy. I had half a sub left. We were probably 10 minutes away from being taken to God knows where, when my dad burst into the shop, grabbed me and my friend and the rest of my sub and said, "We're going home." It turned out that my mother, who was a college teacher and involved in all sorts of volunteering with disadvantaged people, had enough contacts to come up with a rough idea of where to look, and my dad had gone from place to place, finding us in what may have just been the nick of time. That night, my parents explained to me how this guy could have been a pimp, a sexual predator, a dealer looking for couriers, etc. I was so scared that he was going to find me and take me away. My parents tormented me for the next few days by pulling the unfinished sub out of the fridge and asking me if I wanted it. I was too scared to eat it.
2.
I am a female, and one day some female cousins and I were taking a walk when we were teenagers. We wandered into a somewhat shady neighborhood. We walked by a little restaurant, and a man came out and said hello. He asked if we had had dinner yet. We said no, and he insisted we come in, and that he was the owner. It was very dirty looking, so we said no, that's okay. He really insisted then, and he said it would be free on the house, whatever we wanted. We still said no, and then we left. He followed us for about half a block, trying to talk us into coming in to eat at his diner. We told my mom about it later that night. She turned pure white and told us that the owner of that restaurant had murdered his wife in the 70s or 80s and disposed of her body by chopping her up with a chainsaw and throwing the body into the river. He had been in prison and just been released, and then he opened the restaurant. She wasn't making this up. She found the newspaper articles online that talked about the case and the fact that he had opened up a restaurant. So a guy who chopped up his wife with a chainsaw invited us to dinner at his restaurant.
3.
I was almost abducted as a child. I really don't remember this, but my mom does vividly. We were at Sears in the mall and I was in the stroller. My mom was looking at some items down an aisle and left the stroller at the end of the aisle. She turns and the stroller is gone, and this woman and man are pushing the stroller away. She yells and they walk away very quickly. By the time she got to the stroller, they were gone. I was almost abducted as a child. Wow.
4.
When I was about 11, I was taking my dog for a walk down by the river. Tia was a large shepherd mix and was normally very docile. Suddenly, and for no apparent reason, She started going berserk. She was barking furiously and lunging toward a heavily shaded area. While I was struggling with her, suddenly a man appeared right in front of us, seemingly out of nowhere. He was just staring directly at me with a creepy look on his face, slightly out of reach of my snarling dog. "Good dog," he commented, and his body language said he wanted to make a move towards us. Yeah, thanks. I don't know what's gotten into her, but I would get out of here if I were you," I replied. He stood there for a long time just looking at me, while I struggled with my dog, who clearly wanted to rip his effing throat out. All the hairs on the back of my neck were standing on end. Finally, he turned and left without another word and disappeared into the woods. Later on the local news, the police reported a known pedophile, matching his description, had been seen in the area trying to lure children into his vehicle.
Five.
When I was 15 years old, I went with my school to Japan for 3 weeks. I stayed with a host family, and every day I had to commute on my own from their place to the school where we met. It took about an hour, a bus, a train, and another train. On the way back one evening, I'm waiting for the bus and getting the usual strange looks. I had purple hair at the time. A well-dressed older man walks up to me and starts speaking in Japanese, and I politely converse with him. He switches to English when he finds out that I'm from Canada, and tells me that he was just in Montreal recently for business. Right about then, he starts getting a bit weird, speaking in a breathier way, standing a little too close, and it gradually gets worse. He asked me if I'd ever had a traditional Osakan dinner. No? Then I have to come and have dinner with him. He's standing really close now, sweating a little, and he pulls out a sheet of paper where he writes like 3 phone numbers to contact him at, and his hands were shaking the whole time. I'm getting pretty nervous right now. My bus still has about 15 minutes until it comes. Then he tells me I need to meet him at this one big train station, and he writes down the time, date, and place, and tells me he'll wait for me there. He starts to reach to touch my hand with his shaking one, which is just so not appropriate in Japan. And thank God, his bus arrived, and I sort of stepped away and nodded and smiled. When he left, I burst into tears on the spot. My Japanese wasn't the best, and I was ridiculously alone, and I had no idea what to do if he had pushed it any further. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the show. If you have a story to share, send us an email, like us on Facebook, share, like, and subscribe.